Welcome, everyone. I'm Don Ulsch, and I am a registered foreign agent, and as such, I have been dealing with a client of mine in South Sudan, and it is the Cush Democratic Majority Party, and which is headed by Bolgai Dang, who is running for president in South Sudan. Bolgai, are you in the room? There he is, the next president of South Sudan, we assume. And I bring that up because we developed an interesting social media campaign. We've been working on it for a while. We launched it maybe 4 or 5 or 6 months ago, and I think that I can safely say that it has been very successful because we got targeted by China's new ambassador to South Sudan, who has now dedicated a lot of money, technology resources, any tools needed to mount a social media campaign to ensure that Bolgai Dang does not get elected and that President Salva Kiir remains in office. What I'm here to talk about is the social media and why does the United States and why should our allies care about this, and what is it that we are planning on doing about it, if anything. So I would just say that the Chinese Communist Party has recently and blatantly moved to keep the African South Sudanese leader Salva Kiir in office. They desperately want him to remain in office. So elections have been put off probably at least for the last 3 years. And the current president, President Kiir, has controlled South Sudan for probably close to 20 years, and for probably 15 years as the president. China has made a significant investment there since 2005. An investment in the billions of dollars, and they are offering more now. So why China wants to see Kiir remain in place is pretty interesting. So let me explain why this small, very poor nation in Africa is of interest to China as part of China's Belt and Road program. And it has to do with oil. South Sudan, 98% of South Sudan's national revenue comes from its oil reserves. It has a tremendous amount of oil. And this is why, as we are struggling with tensions between the United States and China, the Belt and Road program becomes more significant as China tries to gain popularity and gain acceptance by these nations that it's loaning a large amount of money to develop roads, hospitals, and educational systems, but also create technology infrastructures to prop up these regimes, and that is how China is gaining its political support. But South Sudan has not been able to meet its debt service to China, so China now takes approximately 40% of the annual oil revenues. Now, this is important for the following reason. Right now, South Sudan generates about 150,000 barrels a day of oil. That's going to be up to about 450,000 barrels a day. So the amount of money that we're talking about, just look at the cost of a barrel of oil, and multiply it. It's a significant investment for China. So they've launched a massive social media campaign. Now, here's what the problem is around the social media campaign. It's eerily reminiscent of China's campaign to surveil and monitor its own domestic population, the Uyghurs, for example. So if you're all familiar with the Uyghurs, it's a religious minority in Western China, and they have been targeted through massive surveillance by the Ministry of Public Security. So here is the issue. China is taking social media and turning it into something very different than just informing the public, sharing information, and so forth. They are known to actually use social media as a tool to repress different population segments. Now, here is one concern. I was not too long ago at a meeting at the Vatican, and meeting with some of the lawyers there. We were talking about surveillance and monitoring and China's cybersecurity capability. And one of the things that they said was, as you talk about the distribution of technology throughout developing nations around the world, how is it that you can ensure there is equitable distribution and access to these technologies? And I said to the lawyers at the Vatican that China has a plan to not enable equal access, that it's based on their relationship with developing nations and their surveillance and monitoring technologies. And the lawyer said, look, what happens in China sort of like stays in China. And I said, but it's not staying in China. That part of the surveillance and monitoring capability that's being used these days is actually being exported into smart cities. China has approximately 800 or 900 smart city pilots under development. So they test surveillance and monitoring technologies, and they carve out a very narrow slice of that called predictive policing, which is based on the massive individual profiles, and then using a sort of a perverted encryption algorithm that's designed to render a specific result that's desired by the state. And so they have used that encryption algorithm to predict what crimes population segments will commit. And as a result of that, they have imprisoned, or as they're calling it, sent to re-education camps, over 1.3 million Uyghurs over the last few years, over the last 5 years. So these people are now detained in re-education camps. Now, this is what my fear is, that what China has done to the Uyghur population in China is going to translate and serve as a predictor of what is going to happen in Africa, and particularly in South Sudan. So one of the things that will happen is that as this social media platform and capability is matured in South Sudan, it translates into this. There will be cameras in every street, every street corner. There will be cameras all over the place. And they're smart cameras. They will be listening to phone calls. They'll be reviewing text messages, emails. They will be reviewing responses over social media and add that to the profiles of the people they want to target. So Gary King out of Harvard University has done a study, and he says that China has hired roughly 2 million people to write and engage in social media and write messages to sway popular opinion about China in social media. And there's another estimate that says roughly 448 million social media messages have been invented, written by people who are on the Chinese Communist Party's payroll. So it's a huge number, and numbers large enough to sway opinion. So again, the concern is if China does in fact make this investment, which was just announced, by the way, just a few weeks ago, if they do in fact make this investment, then it will use this to target people. It will use their own data and their own data profiles against them. They will then apply this rogue artificial intelligence algorithm to create a predictive policing result And that predictive policing result will be treason. And that will give them the probable cause that under Chinese law is what is necessary to detain these people. And when you do that, that can shift the balance in the electorate. It would suggest that Mr. Bolgai Dang's party, if they were arrested and detained and sent to re-education camps, might not A, have access to vote, or B, not want to vote for him if it resulted in persecution. And that's what China is doing. So China is actually taking these predictive policing algorithms and selling them and exporting them into the global market, but particularly in nations where it enjoys a geopolitical and economic relationship. And if you want to know what the U.S. interest is in this, is that, China is predicting, and others are predicting as well, that by 2050, China's GDP will exceed ours, and potentially India's as well, and particularly if China and India end up partnering to overtake our GDP. Now, there's another concern at work here, and that other concern has to do with China's military-civil fusion initiative. Anybody familiar with that? Military-civil fusion? So military-civil fusion is the concept. Well, first of all, it was an initiative invented by the Chinese Communist Party, and it was considered so important that Xi Jinping has been given the direct order by the party to implement this military-civil fusion and make sure that it's successful. And basically what it is it grants access to the People's Liberation Army to all technology research and development and execution. So the military sits in virtually every key technology discussion and has access to that technology. So what is the implication here? Well, maybe the implication is that a military-civil fusion framework in which social media platforms and tools are developed may translate into a military presence in foreign nations. Now, does that mean necessarily that there's been an invasion, or that China has, declared war on some country because of the entry of the military and through their cyber systems? There's going to be, I'm sure, a lot of argumentation and debate about that. But it is indisputable that the military-civil fusion program is influencing social media platforms and cybersecurity throughout the world as China continues to develop and proliferate technology through its Belt and Road projects around the world, which measures in the many hundreds of billions of dollars. So again, our concern is in the United States and our allies is that there's the specter of China's military, the People's Liberation Army, the Ministry of State Security, the Ministry of Public Security, influencing social media programs and potentially in the U.S. Here's a disturbing fact. A well-known Chinese smart camera company called Hikvision historically has sold product in the United States all over the world, but specifically in the United States. And in 2021, the Federal Communications Commission outlawed the future sale of these products in the United States. Why? Because they were reporting back, infiltrating data from inside corporate and government networks back to Beijing. What the Federal Communications Commission did not do, however, is they did not ban the current 600,000 cameras that were already here. So, as you go out into the streets, you go into government buildings, you walk into private corporations, you don't know, but maybe one of those 600,000 cameras is out there monitoring what you're doing. Now, the FCC has said that it holds open the potential to ban those further But, not everybody wants to see them banned because it costs money to ban products and to have to replace them with other products. But nevertheless, China is influencing social media platforms, cybersecurity around the planet. And it's what they're doing in South Sudan. If that is successful, we can easily envision that this is going to be much more prominent in the future. So if you want to watch what China is doing in South Sudan, it will be a predictor of what it is going to do elsewhere. So they've started with a very poor and a very small nation. It is going to be a test bed, and the ultimate test bed will be, can China, through its social media platform, keep the 2026 elections from occurring, keeping President Salva Kiir in office so that the oil revenues, which are going to increase by a factor of 3 over the next few years, will continue to generate revenue which goes directly to China to cover their investment in South Sudan. So I think that will conclude my initial remarks. Did you want to speak, or we could hit questions, or anybody have any questions before I sit down and shut up? No? Okay, thank you.